Hello and welcome to another edition of Crunch Time Nightly here on ASTV Productions. I am Michael Wags, Wag and Connect alongside Joe Hamilton and Scott Tobin. And yes, I know you're thinking, wait a second, I think I've seen these guys before, and I think I saw them today. That's right, we had our podcast earlier today. We talked a little bit about St. Louis sports as well as the Aaron Rodgers saga, so make sure you check that out wherever you can get your podcast, and also here on Facebook and YouTube as well. But we are back tonight for your nightly edition of Crunch Time, where we break down the entire day in sports. And even though the only team from St. Louis that's playing are the Blues tonight, there's still plenty of stuff to talk about. But guys, how's your day been since we last talked? For me, I got a nice little haircut from KT over at Sports Clips, and I could not be feeling better. But what about you guys? Scott, we cannot hear you. Oh no. Okay, Joe, while we're getting that figured out, how was your day so far?
My day's going good, other than hitting my elbow on the freaking side of the table, which that hurts. But no, seriously, I had a good day. Went to the store after I was done with the show and got back and got to relax a little bit before the show, man, because I can't wait to do these every night.
And Scott, I think I did hear you. We got you now.
Okay. So yeah, it was a good day, man. Busy after we got done with the show. At some point, I'm gonna have to get some sleep because I haven't really slept for like 4 or 5 days. So at some point, it's gonna have to happen.
I was gonna say, when I was talking with you last week, it seemed like you didn't have literally a second to sleep because you were working at the radio station, you were working at your day job, you were working at the Cardinals games, you were doing some of the nightly shows, you were doing some of this, some of that. I mean, I thought I had a rough week with finals and work, but man, you burnt the candle at all different kinds of ends.
Yeah. I think we were both on the same page as far as not getting a whole lot of sleep last week, but hopefully this week will be a little bit easier. I love being at the ballpark, but I'm not going to lie, it's kind of nice having the Cardinals out of town. You know, when they're in town 14 out of 17 days, that makes for some long nights and days and nights.
That certainly does.
It does. And also, Scott, I mean, you didn't exactly have the best week of weather in terms of temperatures. I mean, there was a couple days there where it was really nice, but it was chilly a couple of those days.
Yeah, we have not had good weather at Busch Stadium all season. It's like the weather's really nice on days off when they're out of town. And then as soon as they come home, the temperature drops from like 80 to like 50 and the wind's blowing and it's cloudy. And they actually literally ran out of blankets at the ballpark in the gift shop yesterday because that's all anybody was buying all weekend, but blankets and hot chocolate and coffee. It was the ice cream vendors and the frozen drink vendors were pretty lonely the last couple of days at Busch Stadium.
So what's, I guess, the better environment for you guys, especially as ushers? Is it better when it's chilly and cold, or is it better when it's hot? I mean, there's benefits and drawbacks to both, but is there a better weather grouping that you guys actually prefer?
Honestly, it's probably better when it's cold because it's easier you can easily get more layers. You know, there's only so much you can take off when you're working at the ballpark when it's 100 degrees outside.
Yeah, not just at the ballpark. There's plenty of other places where there's not so much you can take off. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into the day in sports because, like I said, there were a lot of things that did go down today. We've got a lot of baseball teams in action, NHL games going on, NBA games going on, playoff positioning and potential ins and outs are being determined as we speak. But first, let's dive into the NFL real quick because we all know about the Aaron Rodgers saga. We talked about that during our podcast today, so make sure you check that out. But there was a little bit of an interesting side note that kind of came out today that has a connection to the Aaron Rodgers thing. And this is kind of something that Joe, you haven't really had a chance to talk about. I don't even know if you've even considered it because the Rodgers stuff has dominated it so much. But there was an article on ESPN today that came out about how Davante Adams' career is now tied to this because Adams is in the final year of his contract. So if Aaron Rodgers were to leave, that puts him in an interesting spot too because he's had all of his success with Rodgers because that's the only quarterback that he's played with. Hasn't gotten a whole lot of chances with Jordan Love. He has had some chances with some backups for the most part, but nothing really consistent. Is that another wrench that's been thrown into this plan of Aaron Rodgers potentially retiring, that now all of a sudden Green Bay may not just lose its best quarterback, but also arguably its best wide receiver?
Those are that's double trouble right there for Green Bay, because where, in my mind, where Rodgers goes, Adams goes. I mean, I could see this being a package thing, just because they've spent so many years together, Wags. They've built up so much of a chemistry that it's hard for one to leave and not the other.
So if
I'm sure
retires, then Davante Adams is retiring?
No, maybe.
No.
But if he goes, that Aaron Rodgers, if Aaron Rodgers goes, he goes. The thing is, Wags, he hasn't worked with another quarterback over the last, in terms of game action, in the last 5 years. It's always been Aaron Rodgers. It's been well documented how good the relationship is between Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah, I kind of always thought about this. I'm shocked it hasn't really come out, because this was always going to be a big issue.
Well, I mean, you keep saying they're going to go together. There's no way that happens if Rodgers gets moved, because no team is going to be able to fit both of them into their salary cap. So, that's a non-starter in that aspect. And, if you're the Packers and you're bringing in Jordan Love and you're getting all these number one draft picks, do you really want to spend that money on Davante Adams next year, a guy who's getting a little bit older? Or do you let Davante Adams just go wherever, and then you draft a wide receiver to be Jordan Love's guy for the next 10 years, to be his combination? So I think either way, if Rodgers is gone, I think you're right. I think this is Davante Adams' last season in Green Bay, because I don't think he's going to want to stay and rebuild, and I'm not sure the Packers are going to want him to.
Let me ask you this. You really think he stays in Green Bay this season if Rodgers is traded before the season? Or do you think he'll want to demand a trade and he's out before training camp? That could be a possibility.
I don't think so, because for one thing, the money aspect of it, and he doesn't have the power that Aaron Rodgers has. Again, if Rodgers leaves and you've got a young quarterback in there, yeah, in one way you'd like to have the veteran wide receiver there to work with Love, but in another way they may go, okay, sit out. We won't pay you. We'll bring in some of these younger guys, let them work the job. You can pay all the fines you're going to get for sitting out, and then you can move on next year. So I don't think that he really has any leverage to try to do anything with that.
And you talk about him possibly leaving after this season and the Packers going out and drafting Jordan Love, a wide receiver. What makes you think that Green Bay would even do that? Aaron Rodgers has been clamoring for weapons in the draft, and they haven't gotten them for him. What makes you think that they would actually go out there and find somebody for Jordan Love?
Great point.
Well, I didn't say they'd go get him a first rounder, but they may go get a third or fourth rounder that he can still grow up with, because let's face it, the Packers are not going to be very good for a couple of years. Jordan Love didn't take a snap. He didn't even dress out last year for a game. So, I mean, it's going to be, whenever he starts, it's going to be a 2 or 3 year process before the Packers are good with Jordan Love as their quarterback. He's not going to walk in. He's not walking into the same situation that Aaron Rodgers did, where when Brett Favre left, they were the best team in the league and everybody was signed. You got to remember that Brett Favre's last game, if not for a missed field goal, the Packers are going to the NFC Championship game and probably the Super Bowl. So, Rodgers isn't coming in, Love wouldn't come into quite the same caliber team that Rodgers inherited. And I think the Packers are going to be building for the future.
It almost sounds exactly what is going to happen, because you've got Adams in the final year of his contract. Yes, you just re-upped your running back, but for the most part, they're at a point now where they're at a crossroads where they are going to have to rebuild, regardless of what Aaron Rodgers decides to do, whether it's retire or they find a willing taker for him. This is a crossroads for the Green Bay Packers, and that's scary to say, because they've been such a consistent franchise for the last 20, 25 years that it's hard to imagine them not being successful. And you could sit there and say that the NFC North is still a winnable division, which it is a winnable division. You've got Chicago with an up and coming young quarterback, still some issues, but a decent defense. You got Minnesota with Kirk Cousins a rebuilding defense, and a potential new wide receiver, which I'll get to in just a second. And then you've got Detroit with Jared Goff, which sounds so incredibly exciting to any fans of Detroit. So, I mean, the division is still there for the taking in a sense, but they are going to be rebuilding. It is going to be a bit of a downtime for the Packers. Joe, how are you going to get through that?
Man, I don't know. I say that a lot, but at this point, I really don't know because I don't know what we have in Jordan Love. I asked you this question on Facebook or on our messenger chat, and Scott, I really didn't get an answer from you. I don't think I did anyway. Is Jordan Love a number one quarterback in the NFL? Number one. Number two, is he going to be, if he is he a good number one in the NFL, or will he be?
To be 100% honest with you, I can't give you an answer to that question because we've not seen him play at all really at the NFL level at this point. I mean, he's definitely got the talent to be an NFL starting quarterback. Is he going to be good? Is he going to be an upper echelon quarterback? I have no idea. I mean, there's still so many questions there. Like I said, I think he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, but is he one of those tier one quarterbacks? Is he a middle tier or is he in the lower tier? That's still to be answered because nobody really has any idea what Jordan Love is at the NFL level at this point.
And you have to look at the quarterbacks that were taken in the first round that year. He was taken as well. I mean, a majority of those quarterbacks every year, a majority of first round quarterbacks never pan out at all. They were talking about this during the draft this year where it's such a low number. I think they said since the 2009 draft, only 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round are still with their current team. I mean, you don't know, and we haven't seen them in action. So that's a interesting conundrum that they're in, and it's just going to be a really, really interesting time in Green Bay. Now, I want to flip it over to Minnesota real quick because there was a rumor late tonight about the Vikings and the Falcons potentially meeting up and matching up for a trade in which Julio Jones would go from Atlanta to Minnesota. And you're talking about guys coming from the defense like Barr, potentially going down to Atlanta to revamp that Falcons defense. Is that something that's a little surprising to you that Minnesota would enter the fray when it comes to Julio Jones? Or does it really make sense? They lost Stephon Diggs last year, but obviously they got Justin Jefferson. Adding a guy like Julio Jones, does that make them the team to beat in the North, especially if Aaron Rodgers leaves the Packers?
That's an interesting landing spot. I mean, they've got Jeffries, but you got to remember they also have Adam Thielen. So it's not like they don't have 2 really good wide receivers already in Minnesota. I guess you could put Julio in the slot there and try to use him that way. And then with the running back, I mean, that would give Minnesota the best offense in the North by far with those weapons. I'm surprised Atlanta would do that. I really thought when they drafted Pitts, they would keep Julio and they were going to make a run for it with Matt Ryan. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, how that matches up. But, I mean, that would make Minnesota's offense really scary.
Now, speaking of Julio Jones, I was talking to a great buddy of mine, Seahawk fan. And apparently there's a rumor out there of him going to the Seahawks. Now, I don't know how much of a rumor that really is, but could you imagine DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Julio Jones as your 3 wide receivers? Could you imagine that?
The only question would be is who would Seattle send to Atlanta that would be able to compensate for that? Because when you're talking about Minnesota, you're talking about sending some pretty good defensive players down there. Seattle's defense wasn't nothing to write home about last year. So you may have to trade a DK Metcalf or a Tyler Lockett to Atlanta in that instance. So that would be something that you'd have to look at as well. It's not just about bringing in Julio Jones. It's about who you're also going to have to lose. And that might be, in that case, you may have to include one of those wide receivers in a swap, essentially, to get him in there. My guess, it would be DK Metcalf. He's a bit younger, and that's would be, in my mind, what Atlanta would want to go with. But I don't see Seattle being the destination for Julio Jones. So it doesn't seem plausible to me.
No, and I mean, if you're Seattle, if you trade DK Metcalf for Julio Jones, are you really getting any better? I mean, I'm not sure that improves your team enough to make that trade. And, receivers not the problem in Seattle. They still have anybody to protect Russell Wilson.
Yeah, that's the big thing that they have to look at as well. And we saw what Kansas City did to revamp their line this year. All right, we're going to take a quick break here on Crunch Time. Come back, talk a little Major League Baseball. So make sure you stick around for more Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. And we're back here on Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Wags, Joe, and Scott bringing you all the day's action in sports. Let's talk a little Major League Baseball. And we're going to lead off first off with, I know it's crazy, but the New York Mets. We know here in St. Louis they're known as pond scum. We don't like the Mets. We hate the Mets. Everything under the sun for the Mets we absolutely hate. But you have to look at the situation that's going on with Jacob deGrom, and you have to sit there and almost feel for Mets fans, because you have some of the greatest pitchers in this generation right now, and none of them can seem to stay healthy for long stretches of time. And Jacob deGrom goes on the IL today with some side tightness. He was scratched last week from his start against St. Louis on Tuesday, the game that eventually got rained out and pushed to a doubleheader. And then he came out on Sunday against Arizona and pitched 5 innings, but when he was out warming up for the 6th, he ends up taking himself out of the game as he started to kind of feel stiff and couldn't loosen up. They ran an MRI today, no structural damage on the inside, but he's still going on the IL with side tightness. And I guess the biggest question is are we ever going to get to see a full season from Jacob deGrom? And in that case, Noah Syndergaard as well. Are we going to get a chance to see the 1-2-headed monster of the New York Mets at all in their entire career?
Like you said, you have to feel bad for him because the Mets are kind of snake bit, because both of those guys, it seems like every year deGrom has at least a little bit of an injury that makes him miss a few starts. Syndergaard having the same thing, and then of course having Tommy John, which hopefully he'll be back at the end of the year. And it is a huge blow for the Mets because when you saw what Marcus Stroman and Taijuan Walker did against the Cardinals in St. Louis last week, if you would have those 4 guys in that rotation with Carrasco, I mean, that's as good of a rotation as there is in the National League. So, you have to feel bad for the Mets because this was supposed to be a big year for them. They're still in contention in that East, but to not have those guys, and when you start talking about side and lat muscles, that's the thing, is there's just no real set timetable that you can look at and say, okay, we know that Jacob deGrom is going to be back, because those things can linger for months. We've seen the guys miss 3 and 4 months at times because they have issues with a lat muscle or a rib cage muscle or something along those lines and those side muscles. So, just a disappointing for the season for the Mets from that aspect. And then I'm sure Mets fans are pulling their hair out because their prized off-season acquisition, Francisco Lindor, looks like a shell of himself right now.
Yeah, I don't quite understand what's going on in New York offensively. They have a good offense. You have, Lindor, you have Conforto, you have a bunch of guys that can hit in that lineup. And it wasn't just about the pitching for me. I was excited for that lineup, putting Lindor in the middle of it. And I think it's just a pressing issue for Lindor. Maybe I'm wrong here.
I mean, how many times have we looked at a player who spent his entire career with one organization, going to a new organization, signing a big contract, and not starting off really, really well? Oh, wait, hold on. Paul Goldschmidt in St. Louis. Oh, I think he had that issue. Oh, wait, Justin Falk. Oh, wait, he had that issue here in St. You know what? It seems like every player that changes organizations and signs a big contract usually doesn't have a good first couple of months. So, I mean, I get the whole, let's fire the hitting coaches in New York because Francisco Lindor isn't hitting right now. We're in such a now society that you can't give a guy a time to get adjusted to teammates, to a new league. He went from the American League to the National League. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. And we're sitting here a month into the season going, man, that contract and that trade looks absolutely horrible for the Mets. I don't wish the Mets any good luck or anything, but guys, and I'm not talking specifically to you, I'm just saying in general, you got to give these guys at least a little bit of time to get acclimated to the system that they're in, the teams that they're with, the cities that they're in, the new lives that they're having to lead. Then you can get on him maybe after the All-Star break if he's not hitting very well. And going back to the pitching situation, yeah, it's rough. I mean, we are lucky enough to have some depth in our rotation that we can have guys plug in, but the Mets don't necessarily have that. Right now, they're treading water. They're 16-13. They're first place in the NL East. They've got the Phillies in their division who are starting to play well. The Braves are also having their issues when it comes to injuries in the rotation, and their offense hasn't been all that great this year either. And if Atlanta gets their offense going and gets some of these pitchers back, yeah, the Mets could fall back into that third place spot and might not look all that great doing it. But I kind of have a little faith that offense is going to turn around and at least provide them the ability to tread water and maybe push for a second place finish, even though they're going to be down some big pitchers, because I do think DeGrom comes back and he'll pitch very, very well. You still got guys like Marcus Stroman there. I think they're going to be fine. It's just, you just hate to see, Joe talked about this in the podcast, you just hate to see a team lose due to injury. You hate to see a guy lose out due to injury. You hate to see it, but I also look at it and go, well, I mean, Jacob deGrom's price tag is dropping a little bit. You know, if the Mets ever get to a point where they say it's not worth the squeeze, I'd be okay with him in a Cardinal uniform. That's all I'm saying.
Well, okay, Wags. What would it take to get Jacob deGrom?
Oh,
okay,
right now, way too much. Right now, way too much.
No, if the Mets were to get to that point and his
now,
price does go down,
way too much.
But if his price goes down, like you said, it'll start to go down. What is that threshold?
I wouldn't touch Jacob deGrom. and I'm going to tell you what, not that I don't think he's a great pitcher, because he is. You know what I didn't realize until the other day? Because when you think about Jacob deGrom's 32, about to turn 33. I had no idea.
No way.
Yeah. So, yeah, with his at that age, with the injuries that we've seen him have, chances are those are just going to get worse. I mean, that's what happens with aging pitchers. So, yeah, I wouldn't touch that, especially with the price tag it's going to take to make a trade. Real quick, jumping back to Francisco Lindor, and you talked about giving him time, Wags. The thing is that New York isn't St. Louis or the Midwest. No. You know, the papers, especially when you're a guy who signs a 12-year, $330 million contract, you know, if Francisco Lindor struggles for another month or so, the media is going to turn on him, the fans are going to turn on him, and they will boo him, because that's what they do in New York. You know, that's just the way that works. And I mean, the guy's hitting 120. He's only got 3 RBIs. He's got 1 home run and 3 RBIs. I mean, it's really bad. And you watch that swing, and you want to say he's pressing, but you almost wonder if there's something wrong, because his swing looks really slow and really long, and he doesn't look like the Francisco Lindor we saw all those years in Cleveland.
And just seeing him on Monday night last week against the Cardinals, he didn't look like he knew what was coming from Adam Wainwright. And I mean, that's saying something in a game that Wainwright struggled in. Lindor just did not look like he knew what was coming. And maybe it's something to do with the eyes. Maybe he's got some eyesight issues. You know, we know Tommy Pham went through something like that. But also, I mean, like you said, maybe it's a back injury. We see guys with back injuries struggle with their swing a lot as well. It's very possible that there's some sort of injury that is going on with Francisco Lindor as well. And being as how he just signed a massive contract, he's not going to come out of the lineup due to injury, because then it's going to the Mets are going to be looked at as like, oh, well, maybe you knew about this injury and you still went after and signed. I mean, there's a lot of things, like you said, in New York, everything can be taken 17 different ways. So no matter what happens, somebody is going to be in the wrong in New York. Even if the Mets start winning, somebody's going to be in the wrong in that instance. So we'll keep an eye on that situation with Jacob deGrom and the Mets, see if they're able to hold onto their slim lead as of right now. Some action going on. Actually just wrapped up the Reds and the Pirates tonight. Obviously the Reds are one of those teams that are chasing the Cardinals for first place in the Central. Let's just say they did a lot tonight in Pittsburgh. A 14-1 victory. They scored 6 runs in the 4th inning after each team hit a solo home run. In the 2nd inning, Nick Senzel, 3 RBIs. Tyler Naquin, 4 RBIs tonight. Tyler Mahle, 5 1/3, 4 hits, an earned run, 4 walks, and 7 strikeouts. Obviously, we think the Reds are a team that can put pressure on the Cardinals, but it's more so because of what they could do in Cincinnati. Now that we're seeing that they can do things outside of Cincinnati, and yes, it is Pittsburgh at that as well, so I have to take that with a grain of salt, but the fact that they're going outside of Cincinnati and doing some damage, does that worry you a little bit about what Cincinnati could do to the Cardinals' desire to win first?
No, for me, no. If they start doing this against better ball clubs, then you're like, okay, maybe their offense is going to even out. But, you said it is Pittsburgh. And unfortunately, Pittsburgh, for the first month, played pretty good baseball. And they played kind of above their talent level, especially with Ke'Bryan Hayes not being there. But, their lack of talent is starting to show, and they're falling pretty quickly in Pittsburgh. So, I wouldn't take a whole lot of what anybody does against the Pirates right now and really go, oh, man, that team's really good or they're really bad.
Yeah.
It's just they're playing Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh just doesn't have the talent level to match up, unfortunately.
Yeah, Scott just nailed it right on the head. Pittsburgh, man, you got to beat up on those teams. And, yes, they might be the Reds might be okay. I'm not going to say they're going to be bad at all. I still think this team could push the Cardinals, but it's only going to be for a limited time this season. Then they're going to fade. I mean, because we all saw what they did outside of Great American Ballpark last season. They did not hit, or at least in the playoffs against Atlanta, they did not hit. So don't count on Cincinnati being there for the long haul.
I mean, they also didn't hit in Cincinnati when they played Atlanta either, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I know, but we always talk about the difference between.
Yeah, sorry, Joe. They're not hitting on the road this year, other than tonight either. So I mean, it's definitely a trend with the Reds.
And you look at the Pittsburgh Pirates, negative 43 run differential. Yeah, you're going to score some runs on the Pirates. So, like you said, if you're going to even compete in any of your divisions, you have to take advantage of those teams that are easy to be taken advantage of. Pittsburgh's one of them. You look at Colorado, you look at Arizona, those teams you take advantage of. If you win those games, you're going to put yourself in a good spot. And speaking of Arizona, former Cardinal Luke Weaver is on the mound tonight for the Diamondbacks. The D-backs have a 1-0 lead in the bottom of the first. Weaver, 3 strikeouts through 3 innings, just 1 hit given up. Other action going on tonight, the Astros, a 4-2 lead over the Angels in the top of the 6th. Rangers and Giants, first place Giants. Crazy, I know. It's so weird to hear. Nothing in the top of the 4th. And earlier tonight, the Baltimore Orioles took out the Boston Red Sox 4-1. You look at that AL East, and a little surprising to see who's up at the top there. You got Boston sitting 3 games ahead of the Yankees. Baltimore's dipped a little bit. Obviously, John Means had a no-hitter last week. Baltimore started off okay, but they've dropped back down to the bottom of the division. We don't expect them to be good, but are they going to be in the next couple of years a team that starts to make some noise? Trey Mancini's been playing well this year. They've got some young pitchers. I mean, is Baltimore anywhere close?
I don't think they are. I think that organization's been mismanaged the last decade almost as badly as the Pirates have, other than a couple of seasons where they got some luck in Pittsburgh. I just don't see a whole lot of bright, sunny days in the Orioles' future very soon. And honestly, I think if the Orioles struggle or are in the bottom of that division, it wouldn't shock me at all if Mancini gets moved at the deadline.
Maybe a Cardinal.
I'm not sure the way the Cardinals outfield's playing right now. I'm not sure we need to go get an outfield bat.
I'm just thinking. I mean, I remember in the offseason, that was a guy that I wanted to go get so bad, and he deserves to have a chance to win. I didn't realize how old he was, too. I thought he was like 24, 25. He's in his 30s.
Yeah,
he's 29.
29? Okay.
Pretty
still,
close,
I mean,
pretty close to his 30s, and it seems like we're trading everybody to the Cardinals right now. Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, Trey Mancini, everybody is being traded to the Cardinals this year. So, we're going to take a quick break here on Crunch Time. Come back, talk a little bit about the NHL. Playoff positioning is in the mix tonight. So we're going to come back here on Crunch Time and talk a little bit about that here on ASTV Productions. And we're back here on Crunch Time on ASTV Productions. Wags, Joe, and Scott breaking down all the action in the world of sports. Moving on to the NHL. Buffalo, man. Buffalo. I don't know how they still have a team, but as you know, Jack Eichel had a neck injury earlier this year, is missing the last 33 games of the season. He spoke for the first time today about that injury and mentioned the disconnect between him and the Buffalo Sabres in dealing with that injury. And while watching that interview, the only thing I could think of was a few years back when a Mr. Ryan O'Reilly was talking about his time in Buffalo and about his loss of love for the game and just how downbeaten he was in that instance. And Jack Eichel looked the exact same way, sounded the exact same way as Ryan O'Reilly did. And it just got me thinking, he's going to get moved. Jack Eichel is done in Buffalo. Like, I don't even know if he has to force his way out, but he is gone. And it got me thinking about where could Jack Eichel go? What would be the best destination for him? And do you see a team reaching out soon for that?
Go ahead, Joe.
For me, I think it's north of the border in Montreal. I think Montreal goes and gets their superstar, and that's Jack Eichel. I don't know what it's going to take, Wags. You're more of the hockey analyst. You've seen trades and how they've done. What would it take to land Jack Eichel if you're Montreal?
Well, if you base anything by the Ryan O'Reilly trade, it's probably just going to take a couple of bags of pucks because we traded him, Berglund, Saboka, Tage Thompson, and a draft pick for Ryan O'Reilly. So, I mean, honestly, it would take probably a couple of first-round picks and maybe a high-end talent to get Jack Eichel out of there. But once again, seeing what they've gotten in the return for a lot of their recent trades, I don't even know if you have to go that far. I mean, I'd start much lower. I'd start with a couple of NHL-ready players, maybe a mid-level prospect in a second-round pick or something like that. Just see what Buffalo says. If they take it, then you go, okay, I'm good. But if they don't, then yeah, maybe you have to up it a little bit. I mean, if you're looking at it, his play is diminished, obviously, in the last couple of years. He's coming off a herniated disc. He doesn't have a lot of trade value except for his upside. But if Buffalo's smart, they're going to hold off until they get that high upside trade. I don't think Eichel is as outspoken about leaving as a guy like O'Reilly was. I don't think it's that desperate yet. But if they don't get something good offered to them in the offseason, it's going to be a long year in Buffalo, and you're probably going to see him moved for much, much less at the trade deadline next year.
If Buffalo's smart, as young as Eichel still is, you would think they would try to get a bidding war going, try to get 3 or 4 teams, and try to get as much for him as they can. And I would think, and like you said, he has been injured and stuff, but with his upside, I would think there's a whole lot of teams in this league that, if they had a chance, would jump at trying to make that trade. And Buffalo may actually end up being able to get a haul for him, honestly, I think.
And I love Lester's comment. Trade him to the Cardinals, LOL.
You must have been listening.
Trading everybody to the Cardinals. So, I mean, if you look at, if I'm looking at it as who might be going after him, you can't look any further than New York. I think the Rangers are a possible fit for him. as well, pairing him up there with Artemi Panarin, who thankfully is looking like he's going to recover okay from that bout with Tom Wilson, which we never really talked about that. But see, now here's the thing.
I did.
Here's the thing. What was your reaction to that, Scott? Or for Joe first, and then Scott, the Tom Wilson Artemi Panarin thing.
Disgusting. Okay, how in the hell are you going to do what you did to those two guys, Panarin and Buchnevich, and only get a $5,000 fine? Now, I understand that is the allotted amount in the CBA. I totally get that. But how do you not get suspended? How did George Peros has to be outside his ever-loving mind? I don't mean to be all cliche here, but that was annoying when I saw that. Like, how can you in your right mind not suspend a numerous time offender? I mean, this isn't his first time. This is probably his 20th time in his career doing something like this? Thing is, the guy should have been punished way more than he was, and George Peros dropped the ball. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that he didn't get suspended. Like you said, it's not like Tom Wilson's not a repeat offender. Although, I mean, we've seen other instances around the NHL this year where we thought guys were going to get suspended or get bigger fines, and it hasn't happened. It seems like the NHL's been hesitant to really drop the hammer on this, guys, with the safety thing. And then, we saw what happened to the Rangers this week after they made that statement about that, and they get fined $250,000 from the league, and the league really came down hard on the Rangers. So I don't know. Is the league, as weird as this sounds, because of the fact that the league has been trying to go so far to player safety, is the league trying to, in some way, toughen the game up again? Make fights and more physical stuff part of the game again, and try to go back a little bit the opposite way? I mean, it almost seems that way when you're not really discouraging these guys from doing these kinds of things.
I could see that being the case, and I'm just gonna I'll flip the script a little bit. I'm going on the opposite side of Joe's argument. I actually think that him not being suspended is probably exactly what should have happened. If you look at it, you shake your head, but every time that Tom Wilson has done something stupid, it's been post whistle. It's been outside of the standard flow of play. And in this instance, it wasn't. Okay? This was part of the action. It happened. Yes, it was probably a little bit more egregious than it probably could have been. But I don't know. Look at another 3 or 4 of the games that went on that day, and you'll see something very similar in every single one of those games. Sidney Crosby did something very similar to a player the night after. So I get the outcry, and Tom Wilson is a guy that will push the barrier a lot. He is a guy, I mean, the hit that he had on Oscar Sundqvist that warranted one of his longer suspensions was something that, yes, he should have been suspended for, and he is a repeat offender. But I think in this instance alone, it was actually more NHL than anything that he's ever done that he's gotten suspended for. And you just look at the comments from former players in the league. I can't remember if it was Kelly Chase that came out with it or somebody else that said all the fans and all the broadcasters are clamoring for him to be suspended. But I guarantee you that 99% of the players that it didn't happen to would say it's part of the game. So when you have former players coming out and saying this instance wasn't bad, even though it looked bad, then I'm kind of on the train of, hey, he's a bad guy. He's an idiot a lot of times. But in this instance, I don't think punishing him with a suspension was actually warranted.
Yeah, I heard Chris Carver say something very similar to that, and actually said that he thought that the Mark Stone hit against the Blues earlier in the year was actually more vile than this was.
Yeah.
So, I've heard very similar things from a few players around the league and broadcasters too. So, it's hard to say. Again, I'm surprised he didn't get suspended just because he is a repeat offender. But like we said, it was kind of more of a hockey type play when this happened.
The fact is, he should have been suspended in my mind. Maybe not a long suspension. Maybe like 5 games, just to make an example out of him.
5 games is a pretty long suspension.
Well,
especially this late in the season.
Well, you know what I mean. Yeah, if it wasn't even 2 games, just to make an example out of some of these guys.
But he's been suspended multiple times, and yet he still does things of this nature. So how is it going to make an example of him if he continuously does things like this and they still suspend him and then he goes out and does something else? That's the whole thing. I mean, if it was something really egregious, if it was like the Mark Stone thing on Tyler Bozak and he didn't get suspended, I mean, there was a huge uproar, at least in St. Louis especially, about that not being suspended. Well, if Tom Wilson does that and doesn't get suspended, the outroar is nationwide. Here it was just in St. Louis. That's all it was. But Tom Wilson does that, people want him thrown out of the league. Yes, people were saying he probably should have gotten suspended for this as well. It was a bad look for the NHL. But once again, you go back and you look at everybody else that's doing this. Mackenzie McEachern did the same sort of thing to Alex Pietrangelo on Saturday night. He didn't necessarily pick him up and body slam him, but he did. He grabbed him and basically threw him to the ice. So you want Mackenzie McEachern suspended for doing that? I mean, Pietrangelo had his helmet on. Panarin didn't have his helmet on. There's so many pieces that go into it that if it's part of an NHL play, I can see why the suspension didn't happen. If it's something outside of the natural course of a play, yeah, that's Tom Wilson. He gets suspended for it. But when everybody else is doing something to that effect, I can't sit there and argue against him not being suspended.
Okay. What about the suspension of Pavel Vucinovic for the high stick in that game?
How many times have we seen a guy get punished for wielding the stick as a weapon?
A lot.
I mean, in that instance, it was him wielding the stick as a weapon. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's amazing that it happened in the same game and everything to that effect. And then you had the Rangers statement and the fine and all that stuff. There's a lot of things that went on that make you go, oh, boy. But, you can't call out the league. That's just plain and simple. You can't do it. At least in the media. You could do it behind closed doors. John Davidson or what have you could have called Gary Bettman and say, hey, look, we think it was an egregious play. I don't understand why you cannot suspend him, but we really think that George Parros dropped the ball in this, and we feel like he should be relieved of his duties. But because you take it to the media, all of a sudden you've just called out the entire league. And that's why John Davidson and their GM no longer have jobs. Okay, they went against the party line, and now they're free agents. So there's unwritten rules, unfortunately, and they crossed them, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Yep.
So, all right, and in action tonight, we've got some playoff positioning in the works. Obviously, the Montreal Canadiens were looking to lock up that 4th spot in the North Division. They were going head-to-head against Edmonton. And then the other game that would have had some meaning would have been Vancouver and Winnipeg. That game getting underway very, very shortly. But now that game's not going to matter because the Montreal Canadiens have clinched that 4th spot in the North. Now, they fell 4-3 in overtime, but that 1 point did give them the 4th spot in the North. Connor McDavid gets his 33rd goal of the year, the OT winner. Taylor Hall, 2 goals, including the overtime winner in Boston's 3-2 overtime win against the Islanders. The Devils, a 4-2 victory over Philadelphia. And this is a very interesting set of games that just happened down in Florida. You had Tampa Bay and Florida going at it. This is a preview of the first round of the playoffs for these two teams. Tampa Bay was looking to make a statement. Pat Maroon obviously came out and said, hey, by Monday night, Florida's going to wish they didn't even want to see us in the first round. No one told Florida that because Florida just beat Tampa Bay 9-1 over the last 2 games. A 5-1 victory on Saturday, a 4-0 victory tonight over Tampa. I was one of those that thought Florida was done after Aaron Ekblad went out with an injury. But after seeing these last couple of games, do you think Florida can actually beat Tampa in a first-round playoff series?
I think so. I don't think Florida is scared at all. And I'm just going to name one coach as to why they're not afraid. Joe Quenneville. I mean, he's a notorious winner, Wags. This man can do more with less. This is less talent than he had in Chicago, but not by much. I mean, you don't agree? Go ahead. Tell me why. Go ahead.
I don't disagree.
No, you don't disagree. You were like, so you kind of did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Florida has talent. I think they have different talent.
So yeah, okay, but
it's like comparing apples and oranges. So.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. When you have Ekblad go out, yeah, that was tough. But I like their goaltending. I like their young talent. I like Jonathan Huberdeau. I mean, you can't. Their talent is. It's almost not believable, because a lot of these teams like Tampa are going to be like, you know what, you guys are no match for us. It's the Battle of Florida. No one wants to believe that rivalry is any bigger than it is, but it is. That rivalry is going to get intense, and I cannot wait to watch that series. Who has home ice in that series?
I believe Tampa does.
So does home ice matter in this sense? Yes, there are fans back in the stands, but does home ice really matter at this point?
Actually, no, Florida does. Florida has home ice. They're 4 points ahead of Tampa Bay.
Does home ice matter in this year during a COVID year? Kind of.
Did it matter last year?
That's the thing, though, Wags. There were no fans in the stands. There are actually going to be some in the stands. There's going to be a difference from automated crowd noise to actual crowd noise. So that's why I'm asking: will it make a difference or not? I know you don't focus on it watching on TV, but I mean, do you think the players will notice a little more?
Yeah, I think they'll notice a little more, but I don't know how much of an advantage it'll be. I don't know, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it might make a little bit of an advantage. I mean, the players definitely feed off of home crowds. There's no question about that, especially in the postseason. So it may make a little bit of a difference. I'm going to jump direction here real quick, just because Joe was talking about how Joe Quenneville can win with anything and he can do amazing things with talent. So if Joe, and I'm not going to argue that Joe Quenneville is not a good hockey coach, but if Joe Quenneville can do so much with so little talent, how come he couldn't win a cup in St. Louis when he had like 8 Hall of Famers on those damn teams?
That's a good point. That is a very, very good point. The only thing I'm going to say here is ego. I think there was a big difference of ego from those teams to this Florida team. That's the only difference I see there, maybe.
You had some of the most ego-less players on that St. Louis Blues team. I think the only guy that had any sort of ego on that team was Chris Pronger. I mean, you had Al McInnes, you had Pavel Demitra. I mean, you had guys that had almost zero ego, more of a team aspect. So
in aspect, those St. Louis Blues teams are like this Florida team in a sense, all playing for each other, all doing what they have to do.
So that means Florida is not going to win a Stanley Cup. That's what you're saying.
They may not win a Stanley Cup, but I think they can get past Tampa. But we haven't made our predictions yet.
Oh boy. Well, the first round of the playoffs is actually going to be beginning on Saturday. Boston and Washington will be getting underway there. They haven't really released a whole bunch more of the schedule just yet, as the Canucks now their games are meaningless. So the rest of the playoffs will be unveiled here very, very shortly, I'm sure. Blues are tied at 0 with the Kings after 1 as they're in LA for their game tonight. And some other action, the Predators a 5-0 victory over Carolina. That's a playoff preview as well. The Stars a 5-4 overtime winner over the Blackhawks. And the Golden Knights, who only have 15 players tonight, are beating the Avalanche 1-0 after first period because of salary cap issues. That's another interesting concept to believe in as well. We're going to take a quick break here on Crunch Time. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about the NBA and their playoff push as well, because they're getting ready to hit the play-in tournament. So make sure you come back for more Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
And we're back here on Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Joe Scott and Wags hanging out with you for another 9 minutes or so, talking some sports. We're going to hit the NBA real quick and a couple of interesting notes tonight from the National Basketball Association. The Boston Celtics, who are trying to, at this point, hang on to their playoff positioning, currently sitting in 7th in the Eastern Conference and in the play-in tournament as we speak. They're going to have to get it done without one of their better players this year. Jaylen Brown is done for the year with a torn left wrist ligament. Guy averaged 24.7 points per game this year, and it was one of the linchpins, and he ended up getting injured when he ran into Jason Tatum last week. Just a bad, no pun intended, break for the Boston Celtics. They sit 2 games ahead of Charlotte, 3 ahead of Indianapolis, and 3.5 ahead of Washington at the moment. But they still are in danger of falling out because the Pacers and the Wizards both have 3 games in hand, and the the Charlotte team has 2 games in hand on them as well. This is very possible that Boston may fall out of the playoff race because of this. Brown was a big part of this team. Do you think they're going to be able to hang on and make any noise in the playoffs in the next week or so?
It's going to be tough. Like you said, he was a huge part of that team. It's going to be tough. It's been a weird year in Boston. They just have not played well really all year long, not lived up to their expectations. So I think it's going to be tough. They may hang on, but if they do, they're not going to go very far because it's just not been their year. The team in the East that may surprise some people and could be scary, especially if they get in the playoffs, is Washington. When you have Westbrook and Beal, they can both just go off at any point in time. That team could be really scary in the playoffs.
That they can, and actually Russell Westbrook set a career mark tonight. He is now the career triple-double leader. He passed Oscar Robinson with his 182nd career triple-double. And yeah, like you said, they are a team that can be reckoned with and should be reckoned with because when Russell Westbrook gets going and Bradley Beal, like you said, they are tough. And right now they're sitting in the 10th spot. They're a half game behind Indianapolis for that 9th spot. And I'll talk quickly about this play-in tournament that they have going to be coming up here in about 8 days. We didn't have a chance to break it down last week, but this is how it's going to play out, okay? So stick with me on this one. So the 7th and 8th place teams, they play, okay? The winner of that is the 7th seed and plays the 2nd seed overall. The 9 and 10 seeds play. The winner of that game will go up and play the loser of that 7-8 game. Then the winner of that game is effectively the 8th seed and will play the 1 seed overall. We saw the bubble last year, and we saw a little bit of this going on in that. Do you think this is something that the NBA should stick with? And you've had big names like LeBron come out and say, this is dumb. Why did we decide to do this? But for me, I actually feel like this could bring a little bit more excitement to the playoff race. What about you guys?
I do too. I love it. The funny thing is, LeBron liked it until he realized that he may have to play it. Then all of a sudden, he hated it.
I was just gonna say that's crazy. How do you go from loving it to absolutely hating it?
And that's LeBron for you. If it doesn't work in his favor, then he doesn't like it. I think it's going to bring a lot of excitement. It's going to bring excitement to those teams. It's going to bring excitement to the last couple of games in that play-in tournament, and it's going to bring a lot of excitement. I think it's going to be fun to watch.
It will be fun to watch, but it's almost watching whoever wins those games. Is it a foregone conclusion that those teams are going to go on to lose to the higher seeds? I mean, can you? I'm asking you both, but go ahead first, Wags.
I was going to let Scott go because it seemed like he wanted to go.
I thought you did. Sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, more often than not, yeah, the 8 or 9 seeds are, those seeds are going to lose. Again, like I said earlier, I wouldn't want to be the team that had to run into a team like Washington in a short series in that first round.
Right. But you have in the East, you have the 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets, and those are the two teams that are the preemptive favorites per se to at least advance to the Eastern Conference Final. Is any team equipped to beat those teams right now?
You just completely going to leave Milwaukee out of the conversation?
Well, Giannis last year completely went away in the playoffs. He didn't do anything. So we don't know what Giannis is in the postseason. Is he gonna turn it around this year? No one really knows. So that's why I'm basically just putting it in two teams' hands, the Sixers and the Brooklyn Nets. But
yeah, I know, but then you also look at Brooklyn, and Brooklyn hasn't really been in the playoffs as this team in a long time. You Sixers are the same way. They're a team that hasn't really been in this position, whereas Milwaukee was, and now the fact that they're a 3 seed, that might give them a little bit of that underdog status and might push them to be a little bit better than they were this year. I mean, they're only a game behind Brooklyn for second right now. So it's not like they're way off the mark of these other two teams. I get your point about Giannis. I mean, they weren't great in the playoffs last year, but it was also an odd year and not something that anybody was accustomed to. So, I'm not going to completely write off Milwaukee. I think a team like Atlanta is another team that's kind of scary. Trae Young can just go off like crazy. I mean, he had 36 points tonight in that win against Washington. So there's a lot of scary teams in the East that I wouldn't want to be going up against. Then you jump over to the West, and speaking of 8 or 9, 10 seeds that get in, is it a foregone conclusion that they're going to get bounced? I mean, you've got Utah and Phoenix in the 1 and 2 spots. And I dare you to tell me that you would take either of those teams against a Golden State Warriors or a San Antonio Spurs team. Golden State, yes, they're an 8 seed right now, and who knows what's going to happen, but these guys are starting to get hot. They have a pedigree about them. They've won championships. Are you going to sit there and tell me that Golden State is going to be that team that you're going to just basically push out and say, no, they're not going to do anything against Utah or Phoenix? I mean, I'd actually probably take Golden State over Utah or Phoenix right now just because of the pedigree.
I mean, yeah, I even said if Golden State finds a way to get into the main playoffs, they will make a huge run. They will make a big time run because they are a team. Anytime you have Steph Curry, you have a chance. I mean, this is probably the best 3-point shooter we've ever seen. So does that mean they're going to go to the finals? I don't think so, because you have one gaping hole, and that has to be Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson is a much bigger entity to this team than people want to believe. I mean, they were a perennial 1 or 2 seed when Thompson was in there, and now they're an 8 seed fighting to get into the play-in tournament. So yeah, there is, I think people are seeing that, but they're also seeing a fact that the Lakers are sitting there at 7 without LeBron. That's a big piece out of the way. And you look at everybody else. You look at Utah. You look at Phoenix. You look at the Clippers, Denver, Dallas, Portland. Do any of those teams outside of Dallas have a guy that you go, yeah, that's a guy that can carry them to the finals? Luka Doncic can carry the Mavericks to the finals. But I dare you to tell me a guy on any of those other 6 teams, maybe Dame Lillard, maybe in Portland. But outside of that, do any of those other teams have a guy that you can sit there and say would drag them to the playoffs, like a Steph Curry, who's only somewhere around the range of 40 or so 3-pointers behind Ray Allen for all time in 600 less games, by the way? Go ahead, Scott.
I would say Jokic in Denver.
Okay. I mean, I'll give you that one. I don't necessarily believe it, but I could give you that one.
I mean, he's gonna get a lot of votes for MVP. He's gonna be right there in the top 3 or 4 vote getters for the MVP. And they lost a lot in Denver when Jamal Murray got hurt. It looked like that might be the end of the year, but MPJ has figured it out. Did you guys see the game the other night when he scored 11 points in the first 2 minutes of the game?
I did not.
11 points. 2 minutes and 20 seconds in, he had 11 points.
Wow.
That's what we wish we could have seen down here at Mizzou, but unfortunately, Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. All right, some of the scores tonight. You had the Hawks 125 over the Wizards 124, Pacers 111 over the Cavs 102, Grizzlies 115, Pelicans 110, Spurs 146, 125 over the Bucks. Currently, the Warriors hold a 54-49 lead over the Jazz at half, and the Trailblazers are up 70-57 with 3:24 to go in the second quarter still. Holy crap, that's going to be a high-scoring game. Make sure you come back every night around 9 o'clock for Crunch Time Nightly as we recap the entire night in the world of sports. We've got Cardinals action going on tomorrow night. We'll recap the Blues game that's going on against the Kings as well. Guys, any final thoughts before we head out tonight?
Scott, I just wanted your thoughts on Keith Hernandez going into the Cardinal Hall of Fame. I never got to ask you about it.
Hate it. Absolutely hate it. Can't stand it. Don't know why he got in. You know, I know a lot of people think that he did, but I grew up with Keith Hernandez being enemy number one with the Mets. You know, I've said this a bunch of times as a little kid. I never heard Busch Stadium anybody ever get booed in Busch Stadium 2 like Keith Hernandez did on a consistent basis growing up.
I am right there with you. I'm a little surprised that he got in as well. So we'll see what the reaction is when the Hall of Famers are brought out later this year. So we'll see how that goes. All righty, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. Make sure you catch us every night once again here at 9 o'clock on Crunch Time Nightly here on ASTV Productions. For Joe, for Scott, I am Wags. Have a great rest of your night. Enjoy the Blues game, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.